and I knew that I wanted the colors to be just like super duper radioactive and toxic looking. And I went out and found the perfect yarn and I made it happen. Hello and welcome to the Andalusia Knits podcast. My name is Jordan and this is a little series on my YouTube channel where I take you through what I'm currently knitting on. I show you things that I have recently finished up knitting, and I talk you through any future knitting plans that I've got. And I'm coming to you today with episode 11, which is very exciting. I've broken the 10 episode mark and I'm excited for another 10 and beyond. And so thank you so much for joining me today for this one. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. I hope you have a good time with this video as well. And if you're a new viewer, thanks for checking me out. Thanks for giving me a chance. I post videos like this on my YouTube channel about every week to every other week. And I also sprinkle in some more topical and tutorial style videos. So if that sounds like something that is interesting to you, I would definitely encourage you to give the channel a subscribe so that you can keep up to date with the new videos that I put out. So that is enough introductory rambling from me. So let's go ahead and get this episode started, and I'm going to start out with some finished objects to show you. So first up in the finished objects is a project that I had in progress last time, and I had a lot of thoughts about this project, and most of them were not good thoughts. And that is this pair of self-striping socks that I have now finished. I believe last time you saw these, I had one done and part of the other one done. And my main complaint in that last episode, which I still have in this episode, is that this self-striping pattern is just so weird to me. It's so weird that you got like the blocks of color and all of the little squiggly stuff. It just like nothing about this goes together. Like the colors kind of go together, I guess, but beyond that, like these just feel like very disjointed socks to me. And despite the fact that this is not my favorite striping pattern, like I finished them off like I said I was going to, and I've already worn them a couple times. They've just been washed recently. They're still a little damp now that I'm holding them up. But yeah, so this is fine. It's not the end of the world that these were not socks that I liked. It was disappointing though, because in the ball, I loved all these colors working together. They look so much better. Like the colorway looks so much better, like skeined up than it does knit up. But no one has to look at these, including myself, because they're just going to go in shoes, and I don't have to think about them as long as they're doing their job. I don't have to like think too much about the aesthetics of my socks, thankfully. One weird thing that I did notice though, and this is only my second experience with Patton's Croy self-striping sock yarn, and I am like dead certain that like round for round that these are identical socks, but for whatever reason the toes, and so I knit these from the cuff down, so I started at the cuff and ended at the toe, and for whatever reason you can see that on this sock the toe there is like a considerable amount of that solid blue at the very end. And on this sock, that's not the case. Like the blue just starts right at basically where I did the grafting. And like I said, like I'm like 99% sure that these are like identical round for round. Like I'm really neurotic about like keeping track of my rounds as I'm knitting. I'm really like particular about like counting the rounds after I've knit and before I move on to another section. So like I can almost guarantee that these are exactly the same length. But I just thought it was very weird that like, you know, I was expecting some discrepancy, you know, in the dyeing, but from skein to skein. But I was really surprised that like there was that much discrepancy in the length of the different colorways in these self-striping socks. So yeah, not a lot of exciting or interesting things to say about this other than I am still not crazy about the self-striping colorway, but it's fine. Once again, it's fine. It's a pair of socks. It's not the end of the world. If you are interested in the colorway, I believe to avoid it, or if this looks interesting to you, this is Patent Croix stripes in the colorway I believe is called like Wild Berry or something berry. Of course, I'm completely blanking now, so I'll put it up on the screen, the name of the title. If it's not Wild Berry, it's something berry. But yeah, so yeah, if you want to actively seek these out or actively avoid this colorway, now you know what the name of it is. All right, next up in the finished objects, I am kind of double dipping because these two things that I'm going to show you together have already gotten an entire video to themselves. And so it feels a little weird to talk about them again. And so if you want to watch the video where I really go in depth, I'll leave the link to that below. But for now, I'm just going to talk about these more as projects than the experiments that they initially were. And these are two ribbed beanies that I knit using Granny Square yarn. So Red Heart is a yarn brand, and within the last couple years, I don't know if it was in 2025 or 2024, but at some point in the last couple years, they released a line of yarn where the color changes are placed so that you can crochet a granny square out of this yarn without having to change any colors and without having any extra ends to weave in. And so I wanted to see, could I do anything interesting with this yarn that is intended for crochet but with knitting? And it turns out, yeah, you actually kind of can, as long as you want double-stranded rib beanies. And so these I did in two different colorways from this Granny Square yarn. And basically both of these beanies, the yarn is held double. And in this one with the really defined pink stripes, I held one strand of the yarn with the color changes going in the intended direction, and the other strand of yarn I held, the color changes were going in the opposite direction. And so they met at the midpoint, which ended up being this fuchsia color. And so you get these really thick, distinctive stripes on this one. And on this second beanie, it was also held double, but both strands of the yarn were held with the color changes moving in the intended direction. It's just that one of the strands I started at the beginning of the color changes, and the other strand I started about halfway through the color changes. And so you still get some striping, especially in the white, because that's the color that you get the most of in this colorway. But the stripes are not as defined as they are in this one. And so in terms of like the color effects, I'm so super thrilled with these. It ended up being a great experiment. But in terms of like finished objects, I'm a little annoyed at these. And it's mostly my fault. At least in this case, it's my fault. Because this was the first of the two beanies I knit, and I did not do a gauge swatch on them. And so this one ended up being, it's definitely too short and too tight when I do the folded brim action. I can't get it over my earlobes, and it's very tight on my head. And then when I do it unfolded brim, it looks just like kind of ridiculous. You can't really see. Let's see if I can get it. Yeah, there we go. It's kind of got this peanut head thing going on that I don't really like. So yeah, this one's kind of a fail. This one's absolutely, I'm going to have to find a good home for it, because as much as I love the colors, like the fit and the way it looks on me, I'm never going to wear this. But now this one is a little bit of a different story, because this was the second one I knit. And so I knew going in that I needed to add about like 4 to 8 extra stitches to get it to the size I wanted. And this one, it works much better with the folded brim. It goes completely over my earlobes and then some, which I really like. And with the folded brim, you don't get the kind of crazy peanut head thing going on. And so while this hat, I don't hate this hat, and there are occasions when I would wear this hat, including the ice storm we just had last weekend. It really came in handy when those temps were super duper cold. But that being said, this is, at the end of the day, this is a acrylic beanie that is made with 2 strands of worsted held double. And so it's really only on the coldest of cold days when wearing this for any length of time is actually comfortable and beneficial. Otherwise, if it's not just deathly cold outside, my head is gonna get overheated and start sweating really quickly with a fabric this thick, I mean, like, it's crazy. Like, it's like a 1/4 inch thickness of fabric. And then on top of that, whenever I fold it double, it's insulating to a fault almost. It's a very like big bulky beanie. So I guess, like, if I was living up in the Arctic Circle and I was encountering like crazy cold temps all the time, I might get a little bit more use out of this one. But for now, this one, I definitely don't want to like toss it or trash it. And I probably won't give this one away either because like I said, I really love the color effects I got with these. But this is a beanie that I am not going to be pulling out unless it is just the coldest day of the year. And then even then I might reconsider. But yeah, so those are my two granny square beanies. And I kind of just breezed through all of that. If you want like a bigger explanation of how I knit these hats and the other experiments that I did with the granny square yarn, like I said, I will link that other video in the description below. So now it's time to move into the works in progress. Although for sanity reasons, I have kind of been considering this first work in progress I'm going to show you as sort of a finished object itself, but not really. It's more just to keep myself like from losing my mind in knitting this big project. And that is the Sandpoint Pullover, which I showed you, I believe, for the first time in the last episode. And so this time around, I have finished the back panel completely. And like I said, I am going to go ahead and, for my own sake, consider this kind of a finished object. It's like the first of 4 finished objects in knitting a sweater because the process just takes so long and it feels like such a slog that I want wins whenever I can get them. So yeah, back panel's a finished object, front panel's a finished object, and each sleeve is its own finished object as well. And that's how I'm going to count this so that like I don't feel as like despairing when I'm in the slog of like the middle of knitting this thing and I've already come so far and I've still got so far to go. At least I'm going to think back to like these finished objects that I have. And so this first one I have is the back panel of the sweater, and there's not a lot of like exciting things to point out about it. I do like it's got just a little like 3-row ridge of reverse stockinette when you transition from the body into the chest shape, the shaping for the upper part. I like that little dividing line. It's something just a little, it provides a little interest. Like I didn't want anything like too crazy, but I didn't want to just like lose my mind just knitting plain stockinette the whole time. And so I decided that like 3 rows of reverse stockinette would be enough to like keep me going, would be enough to keep me from cracking. And it worked. Like I did. I finished up the back panel. It's pretty just like basic, standard shaping. You got some bind offs and then some decreases up to the top, and then short rows for the back. But yeah, the back panel, that's not a lot really where the interest is. I imagine things are going to get a lot more interesting and probably a bit more complicated when I make it to the front panel, because this is a 1/4 zip pullover, and I'll put a picture of the finished sweater over there so you can see. But yeah, so I'm gonna have to do some shaping for that zipper in the front, and it is also a saddle shoulder construction, which I've never done as well. So I'm excited to get to the knitting of the saddle shoulder and how to assemble all those parts as well, which I have kind of started already. I've begun one of the sleeves, and actually the sleeves are a bit more interesting to knit than the body is, because here in the middle you can see, I haven't blocked this so it's kind of curling up on me, but you can see how you got like this 2x2 ribbing at the cuff, and then some of those 2x2 ridges are going to extend up the arm as well. And so I thought that was kind of a cool little design element. Another one of those things where it's like, it's simple enough that this can still be mindless knitting for me, but it's just enough, like, it requires just enough thinking for me to not make it not feel so much like a slog. But there's not a lot to report on the sleeve so far. I just started this a couple days ago. I have a few inches. But, aside from the ribbing that's going up the center of the arm, it's a pretty standard sleeve construction as well. I'm just going to be doing increases until we get to to the underarm. And I was interested to see, because I always assumed that a saddle shoulder was like a variant of a set-in sleeve. But when you get to the instructions for the top, for the shaping of the top of the sleeve, like there's a section that's specifically called like the raglan decreases. And so I guess I always just assumed that a raglan sweater is going to have to, the sleeves like go all the way up to the neck. But with the saddle shoulder, the sleeves aren't going all the way up to the neck because only that saddle part is going up to the neck. And so I thought that made it like a variant of the set-in sleeve, but I guess it is a variant of the raglan, which is fine. Like of set-in sleeves and raglans, I feel like both of those types of sweaters I look great in. So it's not a big deal. But yeah, I'm gonna have to do some more research into like what exactly is going on with a saddle sleeve, a saddle shoulder, and how that like makes it different from the other standard sweater types. But yeah, so that is my progress so far on the Sandpoint Pullover. And I've been working on this for about a month. Like I said, like a lot of sweater knitting for me, it's not so much the knitting that's a problem, it's the psychology of it all. Like knowing that it's going to take me at least like a couple months, probably 3, before this thing is completed entirely. And so I imagine that after I get this sleeve done, I might put this to the side for a couple of weeks, a week or two, just to like cleanse the palette and do something that I can like knit quickly and get off the needles and have like a fast win. Because yeah, like I said, I'm starting to feel the slog. I think I have the rest of the sleeve in me, but beyond that, I think I'm going to need a little time to recharge before I start up with the Sandpoint Pullover again. All right, so I am very excited about this next finish, or this next work in progress, because it came to me on a whim and I started it on a whim, and a lot of times my whims don't work out as nicely as they have, but for whatever reason, everything has just sort of fallen into place with this weird idea I had. And so a couple of weeks ago, for whatever reason, I just like woke up one day and got it in my mind that I wanted to knit Andrea Mowry's pattern, the Ooey Gooey Cowl. I've never knit an Andrea Mowry pattern in my life, and while I enjoy her YouTube series, and I think she's a good designer, like a lot of her things are just not in my style, so that was kind of very odd for me to like actively desire to knit something by Andrea Mowry. And I knew that I wanted to knit it in boucle yarn, which I have never worked with in my life. And I knew that I wanted the colors to be just like super duper radioactive and toxic looking. And I went out and found the perfect yarn and I made it happen. And so I have now started this absolutely buck wild Ooey Gooey Cowl in just the most like radioactive green and pink colors I could find. And I have to say, like, as much of an adventure and as much of a challenge this yarn has been to knit with, this has been so much fun. The results have turned out exactly like I imagined in my mind. And like I said, I've never used boucle yarn before, so like I was going on like pure fantasy, like as to what this like stranded color would look like in just a pure boucle yarn. And it has just worked out so nice, so perfectly, just like I imagined in my head. And it has been so great. So the yarn that I have knit this in is called Bubbly Boucle, and it is from Knit Picks. And it is majority alpaca. I'm not entirely sure of the exact percentage breakdown, but it's like overwhelming majority alpaca, like 80% or something. And then like the core or whatever that the loops are spun around is merino and nylon, I believe. And so, like I said, this has been so much fun, but it's also been a bit of a learning experience and a learning curve, because if you have ever worked with boucle yarn before, you know just like how disagreeable this stuff can be. You know like how hard it can be to tell, have I like stuck the needle through an actual stitch, or have I just hooked some of the like the loose loops that are like hanging off of the yarn? And so I learned real quickly that this is a sport weight yarn, but this is not to be knit at traditional sport weight needles. I think I eventually settled on, I believe these are a size 5. Yeah, so this is a size 5 even though the yarn is sport weight, which is normally, as someone who knits looser than normal in general, like that should give me just a ridiculously open, gapey fabric. But because of the nature of the boucle, it really does it. It fills in so well. It just looks like such a solid fabric when you get it right up into it. It's such a beautiful effect. And yeah, so it's been a lot of fun, but it's definitely come with its challenges as well. And it's kind of slow going. This is definitely not yarn that I'm knitting at the same speed that I would knit a traditionally spun yarn. And it really loves to stick to itself. So it's one that like I kind of have to like be more deliberate and go a little bit slower than usual because it's worth that extra effort to not have to try to fix mistakes, because it's so hard to like undo this yarn that if I don't catch the mistake within like a few stitches, I'm not gonna go back and correct it because it's too much hassle, and this fabric really hides mistakes well. So for example, there have been a couple rounds on this thing where I have either ended up with one stitch too many at the end of a round, or I'm missing a stitch at the end of the round, but because it's so fuzzy and because like the nature of the boucle sort of like blurs the borders between the two colors, that's fine. I just like very discreetly like decreased out that extra stitch or added in an extra stitch when I needed it, and it all works out fine because yeah, like this is not like a yarn that you want to do like really high detail, high stitch definition color work on, because the nature of the yarn is that it's got these the like the divides between the colors, they kind of blur together. They're not as clean cut. It looks more like a woven fabric than a knit fabric, I guess, in that sense. But that is so much what I love about this. I love the effect that I've got, and this is absolutely not going to be the last time that I do stranded color work with boucle, because these results are too good to not try something else. And I have to say, like, I know I talked about how usually well, I don't have any beef with Andrea Mowry or whatever. Most of her patterns are not my style. I have to say, this is like Andrea Mowry at her weirdest, but in a good way. Like these blobs, when you look at the chart, and I guess probably shouldn't show you the chart because that's the whole premise of the pattern. But when you look at the chart, it does not look like the result that you're getting. It's a very long, thin repeat. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see the work build up, because it doesn't. In a lot of color work charts, like what you see on the chart is what you get, like in the finished result. But this is one pattern where that's not the case, and that's been really fun to see. And I don't know. Once again, there's just something about these blobs and how sort of just like abstract and blobby they are, that it feels very, very weird for Andrea Mowry, but I'm loving it. It's weird in a good way, absolutely. So yeah, like I said, this project has been a resounding success, and despite how annoying the yarn is, it's been really fun to knit, but I know that all of that will eventually come to an end when it comes time to seam the cowl to itself. So for those of you that don't know, I think she does a lot of this construction in her cowl patterns, where basically you're knitting like a tube, like I'm knitting in the round, this tube. And once it gets long enough that I can like wrap it around my neck, I am going to remove this, this provisional cast on that I've done here at the beginning, and I'm going to graft these starting stitches to the end of the tube. And for anyone who has ever worked with boucle, like, you know how annoying trying to undo stitches is, because I've already done a little practice on some swatches about getting this provisional cast on undone and getting those boucle stitches back on the needles for grafting, and it's going to be really hard and really annoying. And it's one of those things I'm just going to try to put it out of my mind until I get to it. I know how to graft. The grafting is not the problem. It is 100% dealing with the boucle and having to graft that's going to be the problem. But that is an issue that I will worry about when I get to it. And for now, I'm just going to enjoy how fun and wacky and bright and colorful and crazy this pattern is, and have some more fun with it until it comes time to graft it. All right, now it is time for some acquisitions and future knitting plans. And I've got a few things to show you in this section. And we'll start with maybe some of the least exciting because you've already seen a lot of this just now. But I mentioned when I showed you the Ooey Gooey Cowl that I absolutely had more plans for knitting stranded colorwork in boucle. And so I also have a couple of other very radioactive looking colors of this yarn, which I like. Props to Bubbly Bouquet, props to Knitpicks, because yeah, I was really struggling to find brightly colored boucle yarn. Like finding boucle yarn in general, that was not an issue, but finding these neon crazy colors at a price point that I was willing to pay was kind of a challenge. And so I'm glad that I ran into this yarn on the Knitpicks website. But yeah, I have a couple additional colors, just this bright orange and this bright blue. And I'm not sure what I want to do with this one next. I probably won't knit a pattern from somebody else. I think I'd probably like to do some experimenting with this one. But it's going to be kind of a challenge because I think I haven't run any tests or experiments or anything beyond working on the Ooey Gooey. But I think the reason that the boucle works so good for a pattern like that is because the color work is very sort of blobby and amorphous, and I think that's where the boucle is going to shine. And I'm worried that if I'm trying to do pictorial stranded color work or something like that, where there's a lot of tiny detail, it's not going to look as good, and a lot of those details are going to get lost in the loops of the yarn. And so I think it's going to come down to designing a good color work chart for this, something that's going to work with the boucle instead of against it. And right now I think that's going to be something that's sort of maybe not a lot of sharp lines and angles, but more curved and blobby, like the Ooey Gooey Cowl is. But yeah, so that's my first acquisition, is just a little bit more crazy colored boucle yarn. And so next up, I have an acquisition that is half of an acquisition, and that is some Drops Snow yarn that I bought to make my boyfriend a pair of the sailor slippers. And so I bought 2 colors of this off of Amazon, and I believe they're coming from different vendors, which is why I've only gotten half of this. But so I've gotten a quantity of this brown, and then I'm going to do maroon stripes, maroon red stripes as well. And so I'm just waiting for all of that to come in. I thought this yarn was super cute. I've never bought any Drops yarn before, and I've never bought any giant single ply yarns like this before either. So that was kind of new. And my thought was, as someone who has done some drop spindling in the past, I was like, I wonder, could I continue to draft this yarn and spin it thinner or something? And I don't think that's the case. It's very low twist, but I think there's enough twist in it that it would be super annoying to just try to spin this as is. And there's no reason to do that because this is for a felting project anyways. But yeah, so I got half of the colors of the Drop Snow for that, and I'm just waiting for the maroon to come in so that I can start knitting on those slippers. And I'm really itching to. I thought I was going to be able to at least start them because my plan was to do brown for the soles and then do brown and maroon stripes for the top. And so I was like, okay, well, I'll just go ahead and knit the soles. But the way the pattern's laid out, that's not quite how it works. You kind of knit the foot and then knit the sole attached to it or whatever. But so I'm having to hold off until I get the rest of that yarn in. But I'm excited for that. I'm excited. I've never done any sort of felting projects. And that is one of my goals that I set for myself for 2026 was to try some felting stuff. So I am excited to get started on that. But yeah, so there's half of my Drop Snow. Hopefully the other half will be in by the next episode. And then finally, this is not so much an acquisition, I guess, because I've already shown it once before, but more of a plan. And so last year, I'm not exactly sure what episode this showed this on, but I bought some Peace Fleece from Harrisville Designs. And Harrisville Designs is a spinning company here in the United States. And I bought from them specifically because they were the company that spun the yarn for Brooklyn Tweed when they were producing their Loft and other yarn lines, which is a very interesting woolen spun yarn. And I have not been able to like find an exact dupe or replacement for Brooklyn Tweed Loft since it has been discontinued. But in one of her Friday videos, Andrea Mowry mentioned that Harrisville is the place that spun Brooklyn Tweed. And so if you're looking for a dupe for Loft or for one of their other yarns, that would be the place to start. And so I bought some of their Peace Fleece, which is not quite Brooklyn Tweed Loft because it is first and foremost, it's a DK weight yarn. And I would say that it looks woolen spun, but I would say this is maybe like a first cousin once removed or a second cousin to Brooklyn Tweed Loft as opposed to like a closer relative, which is kind of fine for me. My one complaint with the Loft was that it was as soft and lofty as it was just very annoyingly delicate. Even after like knitting and blocking it, I've had some breakage problems with it before. And so this yarn looks a little bit sturdier, so I'm kind of liking that it's not maybe exactly like the Brooklyn Tweed Loft. But I've shown this yarn before because I've had it for a couple months, but I finally sort of had an idea for what I want to do with it. And so this is more of a future plan, I guess, than an acquisition. But what I'd like to do with this yarn is create something in the same vein, very country twang right there, in the same vein as my Contrary Motion shawl wrap that I designed last year, and I'll put a picture of it up here because I no longer have it. I gave it away as a gift a couple weeks ago, and so I don't have access to it anymore. All I've got is pictures. But I would like to do something similar to that with the zigzag and Tarsha color work, but doing something different with the edging. So if you heard me talk about the Contrary Motion wrap when I was designing it, my complaint was that I had done some like shaping so that the edges of the fabric created this sort of like sawtooth zigzag up the wrap. But that ultimately, it didn't want to keep that shape. Those zigzag points kind of just wanted to curl over to the wrong side. And so I'd like to do something that keeps the zigzag in Tarsha color work, but has more like normal, just like straight edges. And I would like to continue to do some like experiments with shaping the edges of fabric, but I've got this idea, this zigzag like wrap idea in my head, and I want to get it done without having to like perfect some technique for shaping the edges. And so this is going to involve some sort of intarsia, but a more traditional like rectangular shape as opposed to a zigzag shape. And I bought 3 different shades of gray. I don't know. When I was looking for yarn, I went with the gray because I kind of wanted a challenge. I've never done a lot of like monotone stuff, or when I do like single color things, it's like literally like one shade of one color. I don't do a lot of like multiple shades of a color, so I wanted to try that, and I wanted to go with gray, like I said, just to sort of like give myself a challenge and see if I could work with all neutrals. So yeah, so that is my plan for this. Is I'd like to do a wrap in the style of my Contrary Motion design, but with some more basic edging inside, so that I can not have to like drive myself crazy trying to get these little pointy zigzags to stay uncurled. Alrighty, well, I think that is going to do it for today's episode. Thanks so much for making it all the way through, if you made it all the way through. And if you enjoy videos like this, like I said, I would encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. I try to upload things weekly or at least every other week. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps me know that I'm making things that you like, and it helps YouTube know that I'm making things you like. But yeah, like I said, that's going to do it for me for today. So I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye!